Hello, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3, and in this particular video, I really wanted to talk to you about centralization versus decentralized organizations and how problem solving and decision making actually occurs in centralized or decentralized organizations. This is part of my Strategy Saturday series where I put out videos that are helpful for anybody that's in business that would find these topics that we talk about in strategy very useful. I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. And so I'm just going to jump right into it. What do I mean by a centralized organization? Well, this occurs when decision making and sort of the execution of some decisions are performed centrally within the organization in a way such that there is only a few managers or a few people that are actually making these particular decisions, right? So all problems are flowing to those central people. It might be one person, it might be a group of people, but they all flow to those one particular group of people or a centralized part of the organization that are doing that. So it's not just one person, but it could be a group of people, it could be a particular department, it could be one sort of centralized location, but that's really what we're thinking about, right? And we're thinking about how in kind of a hierarchy of decision making that occurs within an organization, whenever there's a problem that occurs, that it gets bumped up in that hierarchy towards one central particular location. So you can think of the employees sort of doing things, and maybe you're at a call center, for example, and an employee has an exception that is made. Well, it gets bumped up to a centralized manager whenever there's an exception that is made. I'm sure you've gone through those kind of things. Now, a decentralized organization occurs when all this decision making is kind of put down into the employees, and they're given the ability to not only execute on particular tasks, but they can make all of the decisions or most of the decisions for those particular tasks, right? So they don't have to ask somebody to make a decision, and they can just simply make those particular decisions, right? So decentralization, centralization is all over the economy. You could see this in many sort of ways, and it's becoming more important. Decentralization, I think, is becoming much more important as we move forward in the economy going forward. You can think of many different examples of this, right? So blockchain is the latest one where new technology is decentralizing decision making, and with Bitcoin, for example, a lot of the currency is no longer centrally located at one particular group of people or one country. It's decentralized among many different people and computers, for example. You can think of Wikipedia, that is a decentralized form of sort of writing things, and decision making is very decentralized compared to what we had before, which was an encyclopedia. You can think of the Federal Reserve as a form of decentralized organizations. If you don't know that, the Federal Reserve has many different branches across the United States that actually performs decisions and sort of manages, quote unquote, manages the economy for different locations across the United States. There's lots of different examples of this in many different areas, not only within sort of commercial enterprise or technology. You can see it in governments, for example. Some governments are more decentralized compared to others. You can sort of see United States. The United States, for example, is highly decentralized in many different ways. That was done all on purpose. And, other countries, maybe a monarchy, for example, a country that has a monarchy is less decentralized. It's going to be more centralized in terms of the decision making that happens. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of centralization? And you could think of these as kind of at the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So centralization is one end of the spectrum, decentralization is another end of the spectrum. So whatever advantages there are for centralization, These are disadvantages for decentralization. And the same is true for the advantage or disadvantages of centralization. It's the sort of opposite, and it becomes the advantages of decentralization. And they're both equally good under different circumstances, but they sort of change in terms of how effective they are with the circumstances you have, right? So that's what you have to think about. So decentralization is great for sort of maintaining control of the situation. So if you're a small organization, for example, a small business, great to have a centralized structure, right? Because you can maintain the control. But after a while, the sort of quality of the decision making is going to start to erode, because what ends up happening is as it gets bigger and more information, more problems are flowing towards those central actors within the organization, the harder it is to actually make decisions on all that kind of stuff. So you're going to have to start letting go. And when you let go of that decision making or performing particular tasks, that's when you are decentralizing the role, your role as a manager, and you have to continuously do that. And it's actually really difficult to do. Lots of people have difficulty with letting go and decentralizing some of these decisions because you're entrusting, you're empowering employees to do these particular tasks, right? Centralization is also so for quality of decision making, centralization does a really pretty good job with decision making when there's not a lot of information flow. But when there's lots and lots of information that's flowing to the people, it kind of breaks down in general. That's what we know. It's also faster with decision making. Centralization is generally faster. You can make decisions very, very quickly within the organization. So if a problem goes to a central actor, they can make the decision, then go. But again, it's going to break down if you get more and more sort of levels of hierarchy within the organization. That is called bureaucracy. And it starts getting more difficult to make a decision along the way, and sort of starts slowing things down as you get bigger and larger as an organization, or in different environments it might not sort of fit as well. It is often a very efficient use of resources, and this is the reason why is you get sort of specialization that occurs, right? So those specialized actors in the middle, they're making all the decisions. They can get good at making those decisions, right? They learn how to do them. And a decentralized structure, it's not nearly as efficient. You're going to have a lot of redundancy along the way. So what are the disadvantages of centralization? Well, implementation and employee empowerment are a really big thing. It's a really big disadvantage. You can make a decision very quickly at the top, but then implementing it is going to take a lot of effort, and people are not going to buy into those particular decisions very easily because they're made by somebody else. So allowing other people to make those decisions, they're going to be like very, very happy to make those decisions, right? So it's an important thing to think about, is that empowerment and implementation process, and empowering employees to make their own decisions along the way. Another disadvantage of centralization is information overload. Again, I talked about that. It's essentially where people just, we only have certain capabilities to make decisions and process information around us. We know this. It's been talked about for years now, probably 70, 80 years, where we've talked about this. And it is, we just have limited ability. So you eventually get enough sort of flow towards you, information flow towards you, and decision making towards you, it breaks down, and you can't do that. The other thing that I think is not talked about as much, and is kind of related to these particular issues, but if you decentralize your organization, and I think this is where new forms of organizations are doing a really good job. So Wikipedia, for example, they find problems that are, so part of the problem or part of the thing with management is actually finding problems, not only just coming up with solutions, but identifying those particular problems. Well, decentralized organizations can find problems much more easier because lower order employees that are empowered, they are thinking about, how can we actually solve these problems? What can we do? So like airlines, right? Southwest Airlines, very, the employees are very empowered in a lot of different ways. So they can make all these decisions along the way. They're going to identify problems very, very quickly, much more quicker, and they're going to find those problems and solve those problems than it would be in a larger, sort of more centralized structure in the organization. So that's it. If you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye.